999 women and a single man sealed underground, just to see what would happen a few generations later. Another vault took the healthiest kids out of a school, killed their parents, and made the children into soldiers. While the famous one from the TV show was breeding an entire class of managers. Vault Tech called none of these shelters. They were human farms, each one growing a different kind of human to inherit the world once the surface was wiped clean. So what really happened in Fallout's breeding vaults? What a breeding vault is. Lucy was born as an experiment, but a breeding vault goes a step past a vault that just had kids being born in it. It's a vault where the reproduction itself was the experiment. Almost every vault had families and children. Vault Tech sold shelter, people moved in, and babies happened the way babies always do. A breeding vault is something far colder. It's a sealed environment where the company controlled who paired with who or how many of each kind of person went in, specifically to see what came out the other end after a few generations. The reason why Vault Tech actually cared is the reason behind the entire vault program, and it's easy to miss if you only know the shelters from the outside. The vaults were never really about surviving the bombs. Fewer than 1 in 6 was a normal shelter. The rest were experiments, and the client for most of that data was the Enclave, the shadow remnant of the pre-war US government that planned to walk out of hiding one day and take the wasteland back. To do that, they needed to know things. How a small population holds together under stress. How fast a gene pool collapses when you seal it off. What you can build a person into if you control every variable from birth. Breeding vaults were how the company answered that last question. Each one picked a different trait to chase, sealed a group of people in with it, and waited to see whether it could grow the kind of human it wanted. Pick who has children with who, and you're not just studying the people in the box. You're designing the people who come after them, and the ones after that. Give it enough generations, and you're not running a study anymore, you're growing the actual result. There's a useful contrast the games basically hand you for free, and it's Vault 81 in the Commonwealth. Vault 81 was supposed to secretly infect its residents with diseases to develop cures, but its overseer quietly refused to run the experiment, and 2 centuries later it's a thriving normal community with actual families and names. That's the Control Cave, a vault where somebody said no. It proves the misery in every other vault was a choice the staff made, not an accident of the sealed door, and it makes the breeding vaults look even worse by comparison because somebody, somewhere, always could have refused. Keep Vault 81 in mind though, because everything just gets way worse from here. Every breeding vault here had an overseer and a science staff who could have done what Vault 81's overseer did, looked at the orders and decided the people in front of them mattered more than the data, and not one of them chose it. And the first thing to understand is that they were chasing a type of person, far more than they were chasing raw numbers. And the darkest of them didn't start with any adults at all, it started with a school. They bred soldiers. Vault 75 took the healthiest children out of a middle school, murdered their parents, and spent generations breeding the kids into soldiers. It sits under Malden Middle School in the Commonwealth, and the sales pitch was the cruelest kind of bait Vault Tech ever did. In the event of the bombs, your children get a guaranteed place in the vault below their own school, close enough for a fast evacuation. There were even discounts for families with kids under 15, and if a family couldn't afford spots for everyone, they could enroll just the child. The enrollment terms are written out in the vault's own records, and they read like a school permission slip, which is what makes them sick. Special subsidies applied only to families with at least 1 child under 15 who attended a public school in Malden, with a cap of 2 adults per qualifying child. The whole structure nudges toward the same outcome. Get the kids on the list and make bringing the parents the expensive, optional part. And the fine print is the actual trap here. The program was built so that parents would send their children down without them. When the bombs fell, the children were taken below and the adults were quietly disposed of. The kids were told the surface was a nightmare place. They'd have to be strong enough to reclaim one day, and that the vault would train them into the heroes who'd do it. What was actually happening is a military eugenics program. Vault 75 was commissioned by the US military to breed children into battle-ready super soldiers who would follow orders without a second thought. The strongest and smartest kids were selected and put through years of combat training, running live fire simulations and shooting drills like lab rats learning a maze. The ones who tested well became breeding stock and staff. The ones who didn't were harvested for their genetic material or simply killed. The children never knew any of it was real. They believed they were training to become heroes who'd one day climb back up and save the surface from monsters, and they ran the simulations thinking they were earning that future. They called the surface Uptopland, a child's mishearing of utopia, the promised paradise they were being made strong enough to deserve. It's the kind of detail that tells you these were small kids, kept hopeful on purpose, right up until they were measured and sorted. The terminals spell the whole process out in a calm, normal tone that's somehow worse than any screaming. One late report brags that only 74% of that cycle's graduates were disqualified as inferior, an improvement, with the rest harvested for their genetic material, and one exceptional subject pulled onto the science team. Look at how that sentence is built. Disqualified is just the polite word for a child who washed out and got disposed of. Harvested is the polite word for taking what the company wanted out of the ones who passed. And the report frames nearly 3/4 of the class washing out as good news. A sign this batch ran cleaner than the last. This is a room of adults writing performance performance reviews about murdering children and grading themselves well, 74% disqualified, and that's the number they were proud of. And every one of those disqualified subjects was a specific child who was told, right up to the end, that they were training to be a hero. The ones who tested strong were kept back as breeding stock, and the ones who came up short in a drill got quietly written off as inferior material and removed. The children were kept generation after generation using stored embryos and forced pairings. Each new batch bred a little harder than the last. When the living stock ran thin, the terminals mention using stored embryos and IVF to start fresh generations from scratch, which means the vault could keep manufacturing children long after the original families were used up. The kids were a renewable resource, restocked like any other supply. The scientists noted the latest graduates were faster, stronger, more resistant to pain, and even to heart failure under stress. The only flaw they flagged was rising aggression, which is a strange thing to consider a bug in a program designed to build soldiers. It's a scary thing for that to be the one complaint. They had bred kids who felt less pain and resisted going into cardiac arrest under stress, and the single line item that gave the scientists pause was that the children were getting angry. You made them, you harvested their classmates in front of them, and you're surprised they're aggressive. It didn't end cleanly, and the experiment eventually collapsed, leaving the vault today as a gunner nest, which is grimly appropriate, since the gunners are a company of ruthless mercenaries, and Vault 75 was a machine for manufacturing exactly that kind of person. Vault 75 is the clearest version of what a breeding vault is, a farm that grew people to a military specification and threw away the ones that missed it, with the shelter story bolted on top as bait. And the people who commissioned it weren't cartoon villains in a lab. They were a military contractor and a government hitting quarterly targets, writing up a child eugenics program in the same flat language you'd use for a factory yield. That flatness is the actual horror of Vault Tech, and Vault 75 is where it's easiest to see. And it answers the question the show never quite asks out loud. When a company decides to breed a better human, the first thing it does is decide which humans don't make the cut. Vault 75 chased a better soldier and at least kept its subjects people. The next vault chased that same prize down a much darker road, one that didn't even try to keep them human. They made monsters. Vault 87 tried to turn its own residents into super soldiers, and what it actually built was the super mutant army that's been terrorizing the capital wasteland for 200 years. From the outside, it looked like an ordinary vault. Inside, it was quietly running something called the Evolutionary Experimentation Program, and the residents were the test subjects without ever being told. The goal was basically the same prize Vault 75 chased with its children, a better soldier, except Vault 87 skipped the breeding and went straight for the biology. Its scientists, led by a chief medical officer named Wayne Merrick, dosed dwellers with a modified strain of the forced evolutionary virus and wrote down what it did to them. The families were just told their missing relatives had died of some unknown illness. In reality, they'd been walked down to the medical wing and injected, and the overseer and his security force knew the whole time. They were just following the plan. The plan worked, which is the actual horror of it. It just didn't end up making a soldier at all. Merrick's own terminal logs the process with the flat calm of a man filling out paperwork. A fresh subject shows promise. After a single exposure, 5 test subjects, 2 male and 3 female, watched around the clock. Then, the changes start. Inside 3 days, the subjects lose their sex entirely and swell into identical slabs of muscle, male and female bodies converging on the same shape. Some of them just die on the spot when their brains can't run the new body. Around day 10, the skin thickens into something Merrick notes might be useful in combat, and by day 14, the person is gone and a super mutant is standing in the cell. They come out enormous, radiation-proof, disease-proof, and almost mindless, carrying a rage the scientists flagged in their own notes and kept going anyway. And every single one of them comes out sterile. Vault 87 set out to grow a superior human and produced a creature that can't make another of its kind at all, so when the subjects broke containment and overran the guards they were meant to become, they were left with exactly one way to make more of themselves, by taking in more people. For nearly 200 years, the super mutants of Vault 87 have been dragging captured humans back down into that vault and spraying them in the contamination chambers, forcing the same 14-day change on anyone they catch, because it's the only kind of reproduction the experiment left them. So you get a breeding vault that grew something which couldn't even breed, and it started reproducing by kidnapping instead. The vault took a direct hit in the war, and the radiation at its heart is high enough to kill an unprotected person almost the moment they walk in. So the place sealed itself into a permanent monster factory that nobody could get inside to shut down. It just kept running. Almost nobody comes out of that process with a mind left. The one famous exception is Fox, a subject who crossed through the virus still able to think and still holding on to a sense of right and wrong, and who got locked in a cell by the other mutants for the crime of being able to reason. 1 in thousands, treated as a defect by his own kind. The rest are exactly what Vault 75's terminals kept circling without ever saying out loud. You can chase a superior human as hard as you like through combat drills or a needle in the arm, and the thing you build comes back wrong in a way you never planned for. Vault 75 grew soldiers too aggressive to keep, and Vault 87 grew monsters it couldn't contain and then couldn't kill. The gender vaults are where Vault-Tec stopped trying to build a better person and started running a number so cruel it's the one experiment the games refused to show you in full, 999 to 1. The number. Vault-Tec built 2 vaults where the entire experiment was a single insane ratio, 999 of one gender and exactly 1 of the other. Vault 69 was sealed with 999 women and 1 man. Vault 68 was the mirror image, 999 men and a single woman. Same number, flipped, run at the same time so the company could compare the results. Around 1,000 would have been simpler to stock, and Vault-Tec had the means to do it. They chose the awkward number on purpose because the experiment was really about one thing: what happens when there is exactly 1 of something in a sealed population of 1,000. And the sealed part is what makes it a trap instead of a study. In the outside world, a lopsided group can break up, walk away, or find new people. In a vault, there's no exit, no relief valve, and no other option. So whatever pressure the ratio creates has nowhere to go but inward, onto the same few hundred people for the rest of their lives and their children's lives. These two are the vaults the fan base usually means when it says breeding vault, and the reason they're rarely shown in full is that the implications get ugly fast in different directions depending on which way the ratio runs. Vault 68 with the lone woman is the one nobody wants to describe in detail, and the games leave it there deliberately. A single person made the focus of reproductive pressure in a sealed box of 1,000 with no exit and no relief is a horror the series only gestures at and then looks away from. What little the lore commits to suggests 68 was the shorter-lived of the two, because the pressures it created were violent and immediate in a way that tears a community apart fast, while 69 was the one built to run, long enough to watch the slow genetic damage accumulate. Vault 69, with the lone man, tends to get played for a joke, but the long-term math is its own kind of grim. Every child born in that vault would share the same father. By a few generations in, the entire population traces back through a single male bloodline, and the gene pool narrows toward the kind of collapse that wipes out a closed group when one new disease finds it. The reference point biologists use for this is the cheetah, which crashed to a tiny population thousands of years ago, and has been genetically near identical ever since. Modern cheetahs can accept skin grafts from unrelated animals with no rejection, because their immune systems are all the same, which sounds impressive until you realize it means one new disease could take the entire species at once. Vault 69 was engineering a human version of that on purpose, in a sealed box, with the monitoring equipment running the whole time, which makes it a controlled experiment in genetic narrowing that used real people as the material rather than any kind of population study. That genetic narrowing was almost certainly the actual data Vault-Tec wanted, the exact rate at which a population folds in on itself when you start it from an impossible floor. With the soap opera of the ratio as a side effect, they were happy to ignore. There's a reason this one gets a video of its own, because the individual human cost inside that math is a whole story by itself. The single man and the 999 women and what daily life in that vault would actually become, because that's what these two were really testing. The bare minimum you can start a human population with and still have it survive a few generations. The absolute floor of the thing, it's the same question the Enclave needed answered for its own plans to rebuild from a small pure group, and Vault 68 and 69 were the experiment that found the floor by standing on it until it actually broke. None of these people knew, and that's the constant across every vault so far. The soldiers, the species, the ratios, the residents were always material and never partners, which is exactly what makes the last set of vaults the most unsettling, because it's the one place Vault-Tec finally got its subjects to want it, the volunteers. The 3 vaults from the show are the only breeding experiment in Fallout where the residents chose it, voted for it, and raised their children to do the same. This is Vaults 31, 32, and 33, and the reason it works as the very finale is that it's the same idea as all the others with the cruelty hidden instead of shown. The public face is a healthy tripartite community, 3 linked vaults that trade goods every 3 years in a ceremony called the Triennial Trade, and marry a few residents across to keep the gene pool fresh. It looks like the one functional, decent society in the entire franchise, and that image is doing real work because it's the first vault most show watchers ever saw, and it looked wholesome. Kids in a classroom, a wedding with a cake, everybody in matching blue and yellow. Compared to a vault full of skeletons, it reads like the system is working. That's the trap the whole design depends on. A vault that looks this healthy is the last place anyone thinks to check for an experiment, which is exactly why it ran clean for 200 years, while the ones full of corpses got all the attention. Underneath, it's a breeding program with a corporate goal, designed by a Vault-Tec sales executive named Bud Askins. Bud's idea was to freeze a floor of his own junior executives in Vault 31 and thaw them out slowly across 2 centuries. Every few decades, one of them walks into Vault 32 or 33 during a trade, marries a resident, and rises to become overseer through a conveniently timed crisis. Bud himself never never technically died. He had his brain pulled out and installed in a little wheeled robot so he could personally supervise the experiment across the centuries, which means the overseer of Vault 31 is a 200-year-old salesman's brain riding around on something like a vacuum cleaner, keeping the breeding schedule. The residents of 32 and 33 are told Vault 31 is just like them, only with better food and supplies. And that's the whole explanation 2 centuries of people accepted. Vault 33 even turned it into folk wisdom, with a saying that when times are tough, you vote 31. So the population enthusiastically elects its own handlers, generation after generation, then they breed with the locals. The children grow up believing their father is just a man from the vault down the hall, when he's actually a 200-year-old company man who was picked and trained before the bombs fell. So every wedding in these vaults is really a scheduled breeding appointment with a stranger, dressed up as the happiest day of a young resident's life. The bride has usually never met the groom before that week. Nobody finds that strange. And the whole community turns out to celebrate an arrangement the company drew up before her grandparents were born. Bud has a name for the residents of 32 and 33, and it's the coldest line in the whole show. They're the breeding pool, which he calls the ultimate expression of HR research and development, genetically selected to breed with his executives and produce a class of super managers who will inherit the earth once the surface is wiped clean. That last phrase should stop you, because it's the exact same logic as the Enclave and the exact same logic as Vault 75. Breed the right kind of person in the box, and send them out to own the world once the world has been cleared for them. The difference is the method, because where Vault 75 used murder and Vault 68 used raw isolation, the 3 vaults use comfort, corn to grow, classrooms, movie nights, weddings, and a cheerful shared dream of repopulating America. Every part of the life down there exists to make a few hundred people keep volunteering for the one thing the company actually wants from them, which is children. Comfort is a better tool than fear, and Bud clearly knew it. A frightened population asks questions and looks for exits. A comfortable one files its doubts away for a better day that never comes. So the program spends 2 centuries making sure nobody in those vaults ever has a day bad enough to start digging, and it mostly succeeds. The cruelty is real. It's just soft. Nobody in Vault 33 is starving or bleeding. They're loved, fed, educated, and happy, and they are being farmed, and the 2 facts sit on top of each other without ever touching. Lucy McLean is proof it works. She's relentlessly positive, capable, forgiving, and impossible to discourage, which is to say she is exactly the product Bud ordered. The show's hero is the experiment succeeding, and the selection started before anyone was even born. The families sealed into 32 and 33 were picked off the applicant lists for useful genetic markers, so the farming began while these people were still filling out paperwork on the surface. Their great-grandparents were chosen off those lists, and everyone born down there since has been a crop. And the vault right next door proves what that comfort is actually worth, because those residents found out what they were, and it took them 2 years to finish dying. When they find out, every time the subjects of a breeding vault learn what they actually are, the vault dies. And Vault 32 is the clearest look the franchise has given us at that exact moment. Vault 32 was the sister vault right next to Lucy's, part of the same experiment, running the same trades and the same imported overseers. And around the year 2294, its residents worked out the truth. Nobody knows exactly what tipped them off. The likeliest version is that their crops failed, which meant asking for help, which meant asking questions about where the overseers really came from and what the trades were really for. However they got there, they understood it. The marriages, the schedule, the men out of the freezer, and what all of it made their own children. And think about the first resident to work it out, who then had to say it out loud to their neighbors. You'd have to tell them the man running their lives is older than the war, that their weddings were assignments, and that their children are a product line. It sounds insane right up until it's obviously true, and by then it's already eating the vault. And Vault 32 tore itself apart. When the truth got out, the residents rioted, and it slowly turned into a massacre. Starvation, infighting, suicide, and evidence that some of them ate the others before the end spread over about 2 years until every single one was dead, the overseer included. Before the end, someone painted 2 messages on the wall in blood. The first says, "We know the truth." The second says, "Death to management." And there's an even worse detail under that one. Vault 33 didn't notice its sister vault had died. A few hundred people a short walk away starved and killed each other over 2 years, and nobody next door checked, because the trade schedule said the vaults weren't due to speak yet. The calendar said everything was fine, so everything was fine. That's the whole point of every breeding vault compressed into 4 words. A population of people, farmed for 2 centuries, worked out that the thing using them was not a monster or an army, but a job title, and their last act was a threat aimed at middle management. And here's the detail that ties it back to the ratio vaults in Vault 75. Drazi Vault 32 got the same result as all of them, collapse and death. It just took a different route to get there. Vault 68 collapsed from pressure, Vault 75 from the aggression it bred on purpose, and Vault 32 from the one thing every one of these experiments feared most, which is a subject that reads the paperwork. The company's response is the worst part of the whole story. When the neighboring overseer Betty learns that people have been poking around the corpses of Vault 32, she doesn't panic. She has the blood cleaned off the wall, the bodies cleared out, and fresh families moved in on top of the crime scene, and And then she goes back to running the schedule, and she's good at it, in the exact way the program bred people to be good at things. She doesn't rage and she doesn't grieve. She handles a vault full of dead neighbors the way a manager handles a bad quarter, quietly and thoroughly, and then moves to the next line on the list. That's the thing those dying residents understood and painted on the wall before the end. The people farming them were never monsters or soldiers or gods. They were staff, and staff don't stop for a massacre. They clean it up and reopen. So, after all of it, across every one of these vaults, what was actually growing down there? The answer nobody wants is that the experiments worked exactly as designed. Vault 75 grew its soldiers and threw away 3/4 of every class. The gender vaults found the floor of how small a population can start by grinding people against it until they broke. The master bred his perfect species and learned it was sterile the same day, and the 3 vaults raised generations of happy volunteers who never suspected they were livestock. Every one of them was Vault Tech asking the same question. If we get to decide who breeds with who, and control every part of the box they live in, what kind of human can we grow to inherit the world after we've cleaned it off? And the franchise keeps returning the same answer. You can force the population, pick the parents, murder the ones who fall short and hide the truth behind corn and weddings, and the thing you grow still comes out as people. People who starve, who narrow into a dead end, who read the writing on the wall and choose death to management over one more generation of it. And that's the thing Vault 81 was proving the whole time. One overseer got the same orders every vault here got, said no, and left a real town full of real families 2 centuries later. Everything else is the pile of bodies you get when nobody does. The breeding vaults are some of the most honest things Vault Tech ever did, because they drop every actual pretense of a shelter and admit what the whole company always was: a plan to own whatever crawled out of the end of the world rather than a plan to survive it. If you want to see the full version of what really happened in the vault with 999 women and a single man, click the video on the screen now.